Stop acting important, Evelyn. You were just an administrative clerk sitting behind a desk while your brother was out there putting his life on the line. You are nothing to this family, and you mean nothing to this town. My mother, Catherine's sharp voice sliced through the warm afternoon air in the grand courtyard of the Oak Ridge estate. 60 guests, local politicians, prominent business owners, regional civic leaders, and press photographers instantly went silent. The clinking of wine glasses stopped. Every single pair of eyes turned toward me. I stood near the stone fountain in a simple black dress, holding an old leather-bound journal that belonged to my late father. I was an active-duty Army intelligence specialist, Captain Evelyn Vance. I had spent 7 years analyzing high-risk tactical threats in combat zones, surviving classified deployments, and operating under relentless psychological pressure. I had driven 4 hours straight from base after an exhausting 36-hour shift just to attend what I believed was a quiet family gathering honoring my father's memory. Instead, I'd stepped into a lavish political rally. Standing on the elevated marble patio was my younger brother, Julian, wearing a crisp designer suit, smiling beside a massive campaign banner that read, "Julian Vance, serving our community with veteran pride." "Mother, please," I said quietly, keeping my hands steady against the leather cover of the journal. "I didn't come here to cause a scene. You told me Dad's personal military service letters were going to be archived today." "Don't speak your father's name," Catherine interrupted, stepping to the front of the patio, her eyes flashing with ice. "Your father gave his life for this country, and Julian carried on that tradition by funding veteran housing initiatives across the state. Meanwhile, you hid behind classified excuses to avoid helping your family when we needed you most. You show up today expecting applause?" Julian stepped up to the microphone, placing a hand on our mother's shoulder and assuming an expression of deep, practiced sadness. "It's okay, Mom," Julian said into the microphone, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "Evelyn has always struggled to find her place. While Julian was risking his personal capital to establish the Vance Military Foundation, Evelyn was busy building a career that kept her far away from real community service. We forgive her." Subtle whispers rippled through the 60 guests. A local city council member near me shook his head, muttering to his colleague, "How disgraceful, trying to steal her own brother's spotlight." The public humiliation burned with a cold, sharp sting. Overwhelmed by raw, emotional betrayal, I clutched my father's journal tight against my chest, turned around, and walked swiftly down the gravel driveway toward my truck. The cool breeze hit my face as I stood beside my truck at the edge of the estate parking area. I took 3 slow, tactical breaths, forcing my heart rate to settle. Buzz. My phone chimed in my pocket. It was an automated notification from a regional news outlet streaming Julian's speech live. "We are live at the Vance estate," the reporter narrated as the camera focused on Julian. "Julian Vance has just announced a $1.2 million grant allocation for the Vance Military Foundation. He attributes his foundation's success to the strategic framework developed during his own alleged active service." My breath hitched. Julian had never served a day in uniform. He was medically disqualified at 18 due to a severe heart murmur. Before I could process the blatant lie being broadcast to thousands, a second notification flashed across my screen. It was an alert from my personal bank account. A legal freeze had just been placed on my savings account, the funds I had carefully set aside over 7 years of active service to purchase my father's old farm back from foreclosure. The reason listed on the notice? Pending legal inquiry, estate embezzlement. Someone had filed an official court motion claiming I had illegally diverted money from my father's estate trust into my personal accounts while deployed overseas. My hands trembled. I opened my encrypted military email portal. Lying in my inbox was an urgent, flagged message from the Army Judge Advocate General Office. Subject line, "Notice of Security Clearance Review, Financial Misconduct." I opened the attachment. Attached to the military notice was a copy of an anonymous affidavit submitted to federal investigators 2 days ago. The document contained my forged signature authorizing the transfer of $150,000 from the Vance Military Foundation into an offshore holding account under my name. My mind raced. How could anyone have accessed my military signature stamp and personal financial routing numbers? Those credentials were kept inside a locked, fireproof safe in my father's old study at the main house, a study that only my mother and brother had accessed since his passing. They hadn't just lied about Julian's service to win a political campaign. They had constructed a paper trail designed to frame me for financial fraud, freeze my life savings, and strip me of my military security clearance before I could raise a single objection. Who had provided the offshore account details, and why was the transfer dated 3 weeks ago when I was completely off the grid on an active military exercise? Before I could start my truck engine, a dark sedan pulled into the gravel driveway, blocking my path. The door opened, and a sharp-looking man in a dark gray suit stepped out into the afternoon light. He pulled a leather credentials folder from his coat pocket. "Captain Evelyn Vance?" he asked in a flat, official tone. "I am Special Agent Richard Sterling with the State Financial Crimes Unit. We have a warrant to secure your personal digital devices regarding an ongoing investigation into municipal grant fraud." My pulse spiked. "Agent Sterling, I have never managed the Vance Military Foundation. My signature was forged." "Captain, we have a signed affidavit from your mother, Catherine Vance," Sterling interrupted, holding up a tablet. "She provided sworn testimony stating that you maintained sole digital administrative access to the Foundation's banking portal while stationed overseas. She claims you threatened to withhold your father's military trust unless she allowed you to manage the Foundation's funds. The betrayal was absolute. My own mother had given sworn testimony against me to federal and state investigators. If I surrendered my military laptop and phone, the encrypted intelligence files stored on them, files unrelated to the Foundation but vital to my unit, would be impounded, triggering an immediate suspension of my commission. If I refused, I faced arrest for obstructing a state investigation. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, forcing my mind to evaluate the situation through the lens of tactical intelligence, identify the leverage point, isolate the operational anomaly. Suddenly, the passenger side door of my truck unlocked and opened. A woman slipped into the seat beside me, pulling the door shut quickly. It was Clara, my brother Julian's senior campaign strategist and financial advisor. She was pale, her hands shaking violently as she clutched a leather folder to her chest. "Evelyn, don't say a word," Clara whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Agent Sterling isn't here because of your mother's affidavit." I stared at her, my guard fully raised. "What are you talking about?" "Sterling was hired 6 months ago by your brother as a private financial consultant. Julian gave him a retainer to draft that state warrant to intimidate you into handing over your father's journal." My brow furrowed. My father's journal? Why would Julian care about a personal diary? "Because that isn't just a diary, Evelyn," Clara said, her voice cracking with deep guilt. "Your father wasn't just a decorated soldier. Before he died, he was the chief auditor for the Regional Veterans Land Development Fund. 2 days before his heart attack, he uncovered that Catherine and Julian were using the foundation to siphon state development funds to cover massive private real estate debts." A wave of nausea washed over me. My father knew? "He wrote everything down in that journal, bank account numbers, dates, and names," Clara admitted, handing me a small memory stick. "Julian found out you took the journal from the house last month. He didn't frame you just to save his campaign. He framed you because if you read those last 20 pages, you'll find out your father's heart attack didn't happen naturally." My heart stopped. The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked down at the leather journal in my lap, my fingers trembling as I flipped past the yellowed pages of my father's wartime memories to the very back of the book. There, written in my father's distinct, precise handwriting, dated 3 days before his passing, were meticulous entries detailing a confrontation with my mother. Catherine has signed over the farm deeds to Julian's shell company without my consent. When I threatened to notify the Department of Veterans Affairs, she informed me that she had already transferred the foundation's liabilities under Evelyn's name using her power of attorney. My breath hitched in my throat. My father hadn't suffered a sudden, unexpected medical emergency out of nowhere. He was on his way to deliver an official military audit to his former commanding officer, 4-star General Arthur Thomas, when he collapsed. My mother and brother hadn't just exploited my military identity while I was deployed, they had systematically isolated my father, weaponized his failing health, and covered up his findings to secure control of the multi-million-dollar land trust he'd spent his life protecting. And General Thomas, one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Army, had been waiting for those files for 2 years, believing my father had simply passed away before finishing the audit. 10 minutes later, the heavy iron gates of the Oak Ridge Estate courtyard slammed shut as I walked back onto the gravel path. The political rally was reaching its grand climax. Julian stood at the main podium under the glittering afternoon light, raising a glass of sparkling cider as local donors and press photographers applauded. My mother, Catherine, stood right beside him, beaming with pride as she held a framed community service award. I marched directly down the center aisle toward the patio. I was no longer wearing my civilian black dress. I was wearing my formal Army service uniform, my captain bars gleaming on my shoulders, my military intelligence insignia pinned sharply over my heart, and my combat service ribbons lining my jacket. Clara walked 3 paces behind me, carrying the campaign financial files. The applause in the courtyard faltered. Photographers turned their heavy camera lenses away from the stage and pointed them directly at me. "Evelyn?" Catherine barked, her smile instantly vanishing into sharp rage as she stepped to the edge of the stage. "How dare you walk back in here in uniform after being asked to leave? Security, escort this woman off the property immediately." 2 estate security guards moved forward, but Agent Sterling, who had followed us up the driveway, held up his hands, motioning for them to stand back as he realized the situation was rapidly slipping out of his control. Julian took the microphone, maintaining his artificial composure. "Evelyn, please, if you are having a personal crisis, we can discuss it after the press leaves. Don't embarrass yourself." "I am not here to discuss my personal life, Julian," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the stone courtyard with absolute, unyielding military authority. "I am here to complete the official military audit Colonel David Vance began 2 years ago." Before my mother could speak, Clara stepped up to the media control table near the side of the patio. She plugged her memory stick directly into the main presentation console, driving the giant digital campaign screen behind the podium. The campaign banner displaying Julian's face vanished. In its place flashed high-resolution scans of my father's original handwritten audit pages, side by side with official bank records showing $1.2 million in state grant funds flowing directly to an offshore holding company titled Catherine Vance Real Estate Escrow. A collective, horrified gasp erupted from the 60 prominent guests. "What is the meaning of this?" a state representative near the front row shouted, standing up from his chair. "It's a forgery, a fabricated lie," Catherine shrieked, her voice dropping all aristocratic polish and turning shrill and hysterical. "She hacked the system. She's using her military training to destroy her own family." "Read entry 42, Mother." I spoke into the floor microphone, my voice measured and cold as ice. "The entry where Dad noted that you forged his power of attorney 4 days before he died while he was admitted to the regional hospital." The press photographers began snapping photos continuously, the flashes stroked like lightning across the stage. Julian's face went completely ghost white. He stepped away from the microphone, his hands trembling so violently he dropped his speech notes onto the marble floor. "Clara,
Julian stammered, looking at his strategist in absolute terror. "What did you do?" "I chose the truth," Clara said quietly from the media booth. Before my mother could take another step toward the media booth, a convoy of 3 dark military SUVs pulled up to the estate gates. The heavy iron gates were pushed open by 2 military police officers. A tall, immaculate figure in an army service uniform, bearing 4 silver stars on each shoulder, stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by 2 senior JAG officers and a federal prosecutor. It was 4-star General Arthur Thomas, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army and my father's former commanding officer. The entire courtyard went dead, breathless silent. Guests backed away from the center aisle in awe and confusion. General Thomas walked down the stone path with slow, deliberate, thunderous steps, his presence radiating an overwhelming aura of military authority. He stopped at the base of the stage, his piercing gaze sweeping over my mother and brother. "Catherine," General Thomas said, his deep voice carrying across the silent courtyard like a rolling wave of thunder. "2 years ago, David promised to bring me an audit regarding the misuse of federal veteran land grants in this county. He died before he reached my office." Catherine's lips trembled, her hands clutching her pearls as she backed away until her spine hit the wall behind the podium. "General, this is a private family matter, a misunderstanding. Misusing Department of Defense grants and stealing the identity of an active-duty military intelligence officer is not a family matter, Catherine," General Thomas interrupted coldly. "It is a federal crime." He turned to the federal prosecutor standing beside him. "Proceed."
The collapse of their facade was immediate, total, and absolute. 2 federal marshals stepped onto the marble patio, pulling Catherine's and Julian's hands behind their backs. The sharp, metallic click-click of handcuffs echoed clearly across the quiet courtyard. Julian burst into panicked, desperate tears, struggling against the cuffs as the press photographers captured every second of his public downfall. "Mom, do something. Tell them I didn't know," Julian sobbed as he was led down the patio steps. Catherine stared at me with wild, bitter eyes, shouting incoherently as she was escorted past the very politicians and donors she had tried to impress for years. Not a single person offered a word of support. The local state representative immediately announced the revocation of all foundation grants and pledged full cooperation with federal authorities. Agent Sterling was quietly detained by military police officers for his role in drafting fraudulent state warrants. General Thomas walked up to me, removed his cover, and offered a crisp, flawless, and deeply respectful salute. "Captain Vance," General Thomas said, his eyes filled with profound respect, "your father's audit is complete, your clearance is fully restored, and your bank accounts have been unfrozen by federal order. You have brought honor to his memory and to the United States Army." I stood straight, raised my hand, and returned the salute with pure, quiet dignity. "Thank you, General." An hour later, as the press vehicles and police cruisers cleared out, I stood alone on the quiet porch of my father's old farm, looking out over the rolling green pastures he had loved so dearly. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the land. Clara walked up beside me, handing me a small key to the main house study. "The farm is officially back in your name, Evelyn. The legal trust has been fully restored." I took the key, holding it tightly in my palm, feeling the cool metal against my skin. For 2 years, I had carried the heavy burden of my family's cold dismissal, believing that I was somehow responsible for the distance between us. A single tear escaped my eye, tracing down my cheek, not of grief or anger, but of profound, liberating peace. "Thank you, Clara." You cannot fix toxic, manipulative family members by sacrificing your own truth to protect their secrets. For years, I allowed my mother and brother to belittle my service and dismiss my place in our family, believing that staying silent would preserve my father's memory and keep our family together. I thought my endurance was a form of loyalty.
But manipulative, greedy people do not view your patience as grace. They view it as an opportunity to exploit your strength, erase your achievements, and destroy your life for their own selfish gain. True strength isn't about quietly enduring cruelty from those who share your blood. True strength is standing firm in the truth, honoring those who came before you, drawing an unbreakable line in the sand, and letting integrity and justice speak for you.